Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to get started. I'm sure people will wander in. My name is Gloria Matera. I am currently the co-chair of the Green Party of New York State. I've been a former candidate myself on several occasions, and I'm a member of System Change, not Climate Change, so NECO Socialist Coalition, to which the Green Party is part of. And so I will be your moderator. We'll introduce the panelists just briefly, say a few words to kind of frame our discussion, and then each panelist will speak, and we'll definitely leave time for conversation before we end the panel. So we'll have Teresa Portelli, who was a former school board member. She was the Green Party candidate in Albany for a mayor, and now she is currently the Green Party candidate for comptroller. Howie Hawkins, a longtime anti-war and environmental activist, a Teamster from Syracuse, and the Green Party's candidate for governor of New York State. Bhaskar Sankara, who is the founding editor of Jacobin magazine, and also, I blew my hands. What was your editor?
Senior editor.
Senior editor. And Brian Jones, a public school teacher in New York City, an education activist, and the Green Party candidate for lieutenant governor of New York State. So just to remind you, the name of our session is Quid Pro Quo, what is to be done? And I think it's great that it's this morning. Most people, if you're not a political junkie, you may not know that the Working Families Party has endorsed Andrew Cuomo after a long battle. Yes, but and all week long, there was kind of the high drama going on in the press that was probably similar to who was going to be the next American Idol, or what's going to happen to Don Draper, and when Mad Men comes to a close. We're glad that the drama is over. So the WFP endorsed the governor 1%, and this really happened because they were bullied by the timid union leaders, and they were seduced by the Tale of Two Cities mayor for that to happen. And so the deal, quickly, they're going to work on after the legislative session down the road, campaign finance, raise the minimum wage, do some school funding adjustments. No mention of two campaigns that the WFP have tried to champion, and that we, as real activists and radicals, have been taking to the streets and doing other activism around, which is climate. Nothing said about that. Nothing said about single-payer health care. Nothing said about banning on fracking. And so we're going to actually hear today who's going to do that kind of work. And so I will turn it over to Teresa.
Okay, good afternoon. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm originally from New York City, actually from Brooklyn, Bay Ridge, Sunset Park area. First generation American. My parents came from Ireland. I was fortunate enough to attend Brooklyn College, where I got my bachelor's, and then I attended Long Island University, and I received a master's in counseling. I actually took some post-grad courses here at John Jay many years ago as well. I've been in the field of juvenile justice for over 35 years, and I know well the school-to-prison pipeline, amongst other issues, and the need for reform. I retired from that field, juvenile justice, as a state employee, about 3 years ago to get more involved in community activism. And I am actually a member of the state pension fund, so all of these decisions that are being made affect me personally as well as a community. And I am running for comptroller of the state of New York on the Green Party line. I'm very honored to be here today to represent the Greens. The Greens, after all, is an international party. That means that there are people all over the world exchanging ideas in forums such as this. This Green Party is really the party of the future. It is, and I'm proud to be part of it, it's an ethical party. It does not accept corporate contributions, and it will stand up for the people, not for the corporations. We not only identify problems, we aggressively seek out solutions. Solutions such as a living wage, a decent minimum wage to destroy the present suffocating wage gap, which has so many negative consequences to our community members. We should be using the pension fund, which right now is at $176 billion, to generate not only wealth, but sustainability in New York State. New York State should be a community, should consist of communities of justice and not just communities created to exist for the good of corporations. We need to create a state bank to grow and support those healthy communities and cut out the Wall Street middlemen, break their monopoly, call them out for their excessive greed, and give them competition for a change. We need to build in transparency in the fund. Where are the holdings? What are they invested in? Where is our prospectus and our portfolio? Respect us with information. Do not patronize us. Include us, stakeholders, in real ways with real opportunities to be involved. Create a board of advisors of stakeholders to help steer the fund in the future. In conclusion, it is time for citizens of New York State to be not only free, but to be brave. It's time for us to demand accountability and inclusion, and the time is now. I invite you to vote Green, vote Howie for governor, and the entire Green slate. Thank you.
Good afternoon. You know, the abstract, if you read it, was the left is debating what to do about Cuomo, quid pro Cuomo, because he's got $33 million from a few hundred billionaires and hundreds of millionaires, and he's been doing their bidding. You know, the Green Party, it was no debate. We knew we were running against them. For Working Families Party, it was a question of whether they were caught between their voting base, you know, regular people that wanted a progressive alternative and thought, you know, we could influence the Democratic Party, and the institutional leadership, which is paid not just by unions, there's called a union-backed group, but NYPIRG, the New York Public Interest Research Group's campaign finance guy, tweeted the other day that 53% of working families' money comes from transfers from Democratic Party candidates. Basically, a Hillary Clinton or a Chuck Schumer will get money from Wall Street and Walmart and then hire the Working Families Party to do the ground operation. I've long said that they are a money laundering operation for corporate funding. They are part of the two-party system. So our approach has been to appeal to those people that want a progressive alternative while recognizing what the leadership is about. And they're about getting paid. And that's why the arms were twisted and the SUVs were parked outside de Blasio's apartment. We have it for a direct eyewitness with lots of security. They've been hammering out this deal all week. And then last night they were booing when Cuomo was up on the screen and people were protesting, but they had enough control that they got 59% and got the endorsement for Cuomo. Cuomo, I mean, why the left even thought they should even think about this man? I mean, he's about tax cuts for the rich. That funding he got, he eliminated the bank tax. Manufacturers, zero tax. They cut the estate tax. They don't keep the stock transfer tax. I mean, these are all tax cuts for the rich. And they trot out his progressive reforms. Well, he did get the state Senate to vote enough for gay marriage, and issued a Greens champion by actually marrying gay couples back in 2004 in New Paltz. And everybody forgets that. It's like they, at the time, said, oh, you're going to create a backlash, because that's when Karl Rove was doing all these referendums around the states to mobilize the right. But we got the ball rolling, and Cuomo did get across the finish line, but that's about all he can claim credit for. He claims credit for a minimum wage that was actually a ceiling, because they subsidize employers, the difference between the old minimum wage and the new one, but you don't get that subsidy if you pay 1 penny more than that minimum wage. So they created a ceiling as well as a floor. It's the worst, dumbest minimum wage law in the world, and only Albany could think of that with these two parties down there. And then the other thing, I think Brian's going to talk about this, is Cuomo has had an all-out assault on state employees, and particularly teachers, public schools, with high-stakes testing designed to fail students, teachers, and schools, privatized charters. He's out there with Eva Moskowitz, you know, who's backed by hedge funds. I'll let Brian fill that out for you. But basically, Governor 1% does what the 1% wants. And so we're candidates for the 99%. And so the question is, you know, how do we make that have an impact on our politics. And we have a program, we call it the Green New Deal. They're the same kind of basic economic human rights that Roosevelt called for in 1944, State of the Union address to Congress, saying you should have the right to a job. You should have a living wage. You should have the right to health care and a good education. And we add the Green New Deal because we got a climate and environmental crisis that needs to be addressed, and we want to go 100% clean energy by 2030. And people say, oh, you can't afford it. Well, we have double the gross state product per capita in the state that we had in 1980. The problem is the tax structure has been changed so that the top bracket's been cut more than half and the bottom bracket doubled. You pay double what you did on your first $8,000. It's gone from 2% to 4%. If we just restored the tax structure we had in the 1970s, we'd have $30 billion more a year. That would fund the Green New Deal. It would fund the schools. It would basically take care of the basic needs that we have. That's all possible, and we're not talking about soaking the rich. You want to redistribute income, you got to do it at the point of production. That's why we not only call for these social insurance and human economic rights programs, but also more economic democracy. Instead of corporate welfare, let's fund worker co-ops. And then we need, in certain sectors, for public enterprise and energy, the state bank and banking, public power, because we can't rely on the national grids and the Exxon Mobils to get us to clean energy. We've had an energy crisis since the 70s and nothing has changed. And then health care. It should at least be a public health insurance plan, single payer, or maybe a public health service where the doctors are on salary and we get better control over costs and more accountability with community and worker control of that service. But I would say, and this is my last point, the most important thing we're doing here is building an independent left where we get ourselves together, organize ourselves, not just mobilize. What you get from working families and all these liberal groups is an e-blast, sign this online petition, come to this demonstration, come to this meeting where we'll talk, but they don't let you talk. They tell you what's going to go on. We got to do like Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, or SNCC did to organize that. It wasn't Bob Moses from Harvard, or Muriel Tillinghast from Howard, or Coley Clark from Tougaloo. Students in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. The latter two have been Green Party candidates here in New York. They organized the cotton pickers and the mill workers in Mississippi. And Fannie Lou Hamer was elected. And when the Democrats offered her the deal in 1964, where they said, we'll take care of civil rights in 4 years, give you 2 seats at the back of the Dixiecrat segregated delegation, and King and other leaders were saying, take the deal, it's in progress. Fannie Lou Hamer said, I've been sick and tired all my life. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And she told Humphrey and Mondale to stick that proposal where the sun don't shine. Now, that's what happens when working people speak and act for ourselves. We have nothing to gain from selling out or compromising. We know what we want, and that's the kind of party we got to have. And we can't do that if we're entangled with the Democratic Party and trying to, that's begging, that's lobbying. We got to organize ourselves. And the last thing is there was a poll out, 2 polls, said 24% in one poll, 22% in another would vote for an unnamed working families candidate. Well, I'm a working Teamster with the name Howie Hawkins. I think that poll was about our campaign. I think we're on the verge of double-digit vote, potentially. And if we get that, that will more than double what the independent left has ever got in New York State for any race. And that means we're part of the real political discussion. And really the challenge for us, not just us candidates, but for all of us on the left is, are we ready to organize? Are we ready to bring all the people that want an alternative into an organization where they make the decisions, where they can decide what they want, where they elect leaders, and they start electing their own people to office? We've got a real challenge before us because we're going to get a response in this campaign, and I hope you all will be part of it. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to start with the national picture, then work down to New York State and City. Overwhelmingly, teachers voted for Barack Obama, hands down. There's no question. What people wanted was deliverance from the program of George W. Bush, the program of No Child Left Behind. What they got was doubling down on the program of George W. Bush and a ratcheting up of the program of No Child Left Behind in the form of Obama's Race to the Top initiative. They wanted deliverance from high-stakes testing, and what they got was a ratcheting up of the stakes of the tests. It was Obama who said, not only are we going to decide the child's future based on the test, we're going to decide the teacher's future based on the test. And shockingly, now we have a spate of people cheating on the test. Of course, if you put people's jobs on the line, of course, if you put whole school systems on the line, it's going to become a corrupt enterprise. So we are in a situation where people who care deeply about public education had some hope that things were going to change, and things got worse. The next line, especially for educators in our urban centers, in more than any other occupation in this country, they're in unions. The problem is their union leaders did not stand up and fight this nonsense. Instead, they tried largely to get on board with the nonsense. And so you have a group of really pissed off people who voted for Obama and were abandoned by him, who hoped in their union leaders and were abandoned by them. And you have a situation in which people decided that they were going to have to take matters into their own hands. They were going to have to organize. And one of the developments I'm most proud to be a part of nationwide are those educators who figured out that the question of racism in our schools is central to this whole fight to defend and improve public education. And they decided that the only way we're going to save our schools is if we recognize and address the way certain populations have been historically mistreated and underserved in our schools. They did amazing things. And I'm talking about teachers and educators and parents and students in places like Chicago and Portland and Seattle and now Massachusetts, done amazing things to try to bring that message to more and more people in this country. And those people, that movement, there's a curious feature that I want to point out to you, which is that everywhere we are fighting these battles, we're fighting them against the Democratic Party. Look, I know we're all pissed off about ALEC and the Koch brothers and the Tea Party and the right-wing conspirators. We should be scared of those people. They're scary. But we should also be afraid of their twins in the Democratic Party who are carrying out privatization that was just a right-wing pipe dream 30 years ago. Now it's happening under Democratic administrations. So I'm here, sitting here, representing a campaign for public office that I hope will speak to the people who decided that enough is enough, there has to be a way to fight back, and that somehow we have to rely on our own organizing strength. I hope that this campaign will both tap into that energy and that organizing, and I hope that this campaign will contribute to it, that it will amplify the messages of that organizing, that it will give confidence and strength to that organizing and spread it to places that it has not yet gone. In New York City, I know a lot of good people over this weekend were holding out hope that the Working Families Party would get its act together and save the Democratic Party from itself. But this is an abusive relationship, people. Okay? He's going to change. He's going to change. He's not going to change. The Democratic Party, it's a bad idea. It's always a bad idea to go into a relationship hoping that your partner's going to change. Okay? That's always a bad idea. And it's time to recognize that that lover is never going to change. That's how they are. They're abusive. It's time to have a different love affair. With a political party and a campaign, one could go too far with this metaphor. With a campaign that loves you. With a campaign that understands what you're feeling and going through and wants to fight the same fight that you are already in the process of waging. That is what we're here to do. I think even somebody like de Blasio, whom people, again, held out tremendous hopes in this city that he would deliver us from Bloomberg. But then, when it came to the question of charter school co-locations, sure, he denied Eva Moskowitz 3, but gave in on 19. Letitia James had to sue him. I mean, talk about showing that even the best of the Democratic Party do not have it in their bones to put up a real fight against the corporate privatizers. It's just not in their DNA. That's the best we can hope from them. is that they will rhetorically be against it, but then do very little. If we're going to have real change, it's going to be on the basis of our organizing strength, and I hope that this bid for the seats of governor, lieutenant governor, comptroller, this whole statewide campaign that we're launching will be a contribution to the building of that strength statewide. Because without that strength, brothers and sisters, we have no chance of fighting these people. There's no savior coming from on high. What we get from this, we're going to get from organizing it ourselves. Thank you.
I feel like I walked into a trap. I should know better than to speak after Howie and Brian. But I was actually up until around 1:30, 2 a.m. last night. Not out, but waiting, checking to see the results of the Working Families Party endorsement. And it might be a testament of my youthful naivety or over-optimism that I had to rewrite this whole thing on the way here this morning. So instead of something proper and prepared, I just have a few thoughts and something maybe we could flesh out in the question and answer period. Because unlike a Working Family Party convention, this is an open-ended discussion. This could go in any direction. But more than that, I'm actually not an active member of the Green Party. I've actually never voted for the Green Party, but I am actively supporting Howie and Brian in this election. I think all you should too. But since I do have the most distance from the party in this campaign, I figured since I guess no one from the Working Families Party would agree to be on this panel, I might as well offer some limited thoughts, and some of them would be not quite criticisms, but things that I think we should be wary of as we're organizing and pushing this campaign. To begin with, a lot of people, I know some of them, I'm friends with many of them, in the Working Families Party and elsewhere, were ready to prime their attacks on Howie as soon as they got their independent candidate. He should have waited, he shouldn't have run, they're going to split the left vote or whatnot. But now we see that if not for the Green Party having that ballot access, voters in New York would not be able to express themselves electorally. I might have voted for the conservative line. I wasn't going to vote Republican, but I wasn't going to vote for Cuomo either. Now I think and we're definitely in a position where this time next year we can expect to see the Green Party in at least row C. Let's hope row C or D. It'll be there, and I think that'll set a major important sign to the Working Families Party. If a lot of Working Families Party activists like to think of themselves as a pressure group keeping the Democrats honest, I think they'll see when the base of their rank and file activists, the people who actually care about the really good things that they have done at the grassroots level, as opposed to their every 4-year electioneering, when they see them flock to an alternative, maybe again, this is my over-optimism, maybe that'll keep them a bit more honest in the future. Oh, so in New York, basically the ballot line axis is the Democratic Party has the most votes. They're in row A. Republicans are in row B. Conservatives are in row C. Working Families Party are now in row D. A lot of their campaign for years was built on vote row E, vote row E. And, obviously that's not a very good slogan if you're trying to move up. So they're row D now. But a lot of the Working Families Party members, too, their defense, even of this decision, I was speaking to some of them this morning, is that for all its fault, this is a legitimate labor party with structural connections to the trade union movement. This is something that any good socialist or leftist would know. This is something we've been trying to do since the Socialist Labor Party. We've been trying to do this since the 19th century. But while understanding the real pressures and risks that a lot of their activists, the good people in the party, did when they were voting and going along with this endorsement under threat of blackmail from a conservative union leadership, we have to recognize that this is not a party, a labor party. This is a trade union party of a select group of trade unions with an extremely conservative approach to politics that doesn't mobilize their members. There's a story of Brezhnev, and he was going to a funeral in Italy in 1984. The leader of the Communist Party of Italy had passed away, and there was these massive movements in the streets and whatnot. And Brezhnev, the most horrible stale, turgid leader in world history. I mean, he made Stalin look like he had charisma. Was running through the streets screaming, "Revolution, revolution" in Russia. Because this man who had been in the Communist Party, had been leading the world communist movement for decades, had never actually seen a real organic protest and movement with people running through the streets with red flags and singing the Internationale. He'd never seen that before. His version of politics was Soviet military parades. This is the Working Family Party vision of mobilizing people. So we need to, I think, play the role of the Italians in this scenario and show them what a movement looks like. I would say that our horizon should be a nationwide real labor party built on rank-and-file militant trade union movements. Now, this is not something possible in the next 10 years. It might not be possible in the next 20 years, but it's a horizon we should be moving for. So my one criticism of the Green Party is, and the one way which I differ than many people in the room, which I see this as a useful platform for us to meet and organize and work together. But I think ultimately, we should be pushing for a party that does have a structural tie to trade unions. So we can look at the Working Families Party and say, this is what happens when you connect a movement that would otherwise be composed of activists and other people with the conservatizing impulses of trade unions and whatnot. I think there's a very different type of trade unionism possible, and I think that we need in the future an independent political voice, a class voice structurally tied to these militant new trade unions. We've seen different trade unions. We see the Chicago Teachers Union. We see what's happening in all these different movements. We see how trade unions could be different, and they have been different in the past. We need to reclaim and maintain that legacy. Now, I also don't think we should celebrate the fall of the Working Families Party. I think in a sense we should hope for its resurrection on a different basis. Not that I think that resurrection is likely or going to happen. And even if I disagree tactically with my comrades in the Working Families Party, they might actually prefer colleagues, maybe, like my comrades in the Working Families Party. I think as a whole, I can imagine, even as it exists in its flawed form today, the Working Families Party playing a role, creating some conditions for a different terrain of struggle for the independent left to organize. Certain victories on the ground, on campaign finance reform and public financing elections and whatnot. We could say it's inefficient. We could agree with them. We'd say there's limits to these things. But we should never, I think, and I definitely know that this isn't what Howie or Brian is proposing. We shouldn't counterpose ourselves needlessly to the people who actually feel motivated enough to vote Working Families Party. My mother immigrated to the United States from Trinidad in the late 80s, was otherwise not very political at all. Her move left was deciding she was no longer ever going to vote in the Democratic ballot. She's only going to vote Working Families Party. That's progress. We'll move her a little bit further left, but she's a public sector employee. She has the same concerns. The platform of the Green Party is much closer to her concerns than any other platform. But these are the people that we should be working with and speaking to them directly and creating the separation between the rank and file of the people attracted to parties of the Working Families Party and their leadership. So, just to conclude, I really think that we should all take this as a major opportunity to not only go in the poll booths as private individuals and make our own choice and vote green, but actually go out and canvass and talk to people. There are hundreds of thousands of people in New York. There are millions of people who are fed up with Cuomo, and their response is going to be hopelessness and dejection. They're not going to show up to the polls unless they know that there's an alternative. So, yeah, 5, 10, 15%, it's very possible this time around, and it will send shockwaves around the country. It will lend fuel to other independent efforts around the country, too.
Thank you to our panelists, who you'll hear a little bit more from towards the end. So we just want to maybe spend about 10 minutes or so for your questions, your thoughtful but brief comments. For a little while, I'll try and take a stack. That's how we do it, and try and make sure there's enough diversity in the room who get to speak. And then we'll go back to our panelists. But before that, I just want to remind people that we were in the debates we were in the debates in 2010, and that made a tremendous difference. People to hear Howie, hear his program, hear his thoughtfulness, and that's not guaranteed this time around. So there's a petition called Real Debate going around there. Joe has it right there. We'd like you to sign it. And we will get the word out if you've signed up for any campaign news. You'll also get a link to be able to do that online. So I will try my best to keep track of who in the room would like to speak. Okay, I'm just going to get a few hands now. And in the green shirt and glasses, this woman in the red shirt next, this gentleman in the green shirt, and then everybody else get your hands up after that, because I can't remember more than 4 people.
I think one of the mottos of the Green Party should be no new taxes, bring back the old taxes. As you said. And I think one of the strategies should be how we can get out the word that the Green Party has candidates, because there's obvious censorship of every party except the top 2, which are considered in a game.
Thank you.
Yeah, John Flanders, recently retired member of the Machinists Union. I wanted to address Laskar's comments, because I'm sort of in a similar situation. I'm not a Green Party member, but I am supporting Howie and Brian in the campaign, because in the lack of a organized working class party, which independent party, which I never considered the Working Families Party to be, it was simply an adjunct way of channeling votes to certain Democrats in the pressure group. This is the working class alternative we have in New York State, a Teamster and a teacher, and a model, and hopefully a shock wave for a shock to the system. And as far as the Labor Party is concerned, I would be opposed. We talked about this in another forum earlier. I'd be opposed to the old model of a Labor Party where you get the internationals throwing in their hundreds of thousands of votes and the rank and file get one and so on. I mean, that to me is not going to work, hasn't worked, except in exceptional circumstances like Britain after the Second World War. And particularly is not going to work with the current population of the people in the internationals like mine, who are so conservative, as evidenced right now with the Working Families Party. And it's going to be a different model of a workers' party. I don't know, I haven't got a blueprint for it, but that's what we need. One that the rank and file can really control. And just to give you an example of how bad the situation is with the internationals, we just had an election for the first time in the Machinists Union, a contested election. I supported the opposition. And the overall turnout was 10%, and the opposition got a third of that. Wind it up, yes. So the international leadership can claim they got 7% of the members to vote for it. And on that basis, they're going to dominate a Labor Party? I don't think so.
I'm Megan, and I'm really excited about this. I think there's a lot of hope in this room and on this panel. It's great to hear or see 2 people who are running for governor taking notes while other people speak and really thinking, and that I think is evidence that this is a really dynamic conversation. So I guess my question is, how do we make sure that we're not scary for people that, like, as this is new and exciting, and I think it's important that we who are in this room think about how we can talk about this with people who are very connected to the status quo, and how we can get this message out there and bring in more people, because I think there are a lot of idealistic people who are ready for a message of hope, but wary of a Green Party or of a radicalness.
Okay, thank you. Joe, you were the last one before we
Yep.
go to another group.
Yeah, I was one of those people who joined the Working Families Party, did it on my 18th birthday, thought that it would actually be a voice for change, as Howie said, as Brian said. This time around, and I've seen the insides of both the Working Families Party and now the Green Party, I could tell you I was wrong about the WFP. They're no different from the Democrats. And as soon as I get home tomorrow, I am mailing in my voter registration. You'll have your newest member of the Green Party.
Okay, great. So a few more questions and comments. It'll be Elizabeth, it'll be the gentleman all the way back in the corner, this sister right in front of him, and Paul in the back. And I'll go to another 4.
I'm wondering what thoughts we have about creating a structure that will generate empowerment on the grassroots. And I was thinking just a moment ago, if we had meetings in which we practiced talking to other people about our campaign, in which we, became comfortable talking about it and helping each other develop our abilities to express ourselves and get feedback. And we could do that just together, just forming groups and getting together. Maybe we can do that here today. We can, people that live in an area might want to get together and practice doing this. And of course, I don't know what thoughts there have been about campaign literature, but of course, then we would be able to get campaign literature to take,
Great, thank you.
So that's a proposal.
Mark Freeman, former teacher activist, now labor organizer. Oh yeah, sure. Mark Freeman, former teacher activist and now labor organizer. And I don't want to get necessarily sidelined with this issue, but I've heard this discussion of a kind of like a strategy, a future strategy for Working Families Party. And again, I don't want to get this is not a central issue to the discussion, but I think it's of some relevance, given last night and then the kind of presentation that you just gave, or I'm just really curious about this idea of the kind of like the rank and file, kind of shifting the rank and file, and then I don't remember it verbatim, but you made kind of an allusion. To me, that's kind of like a vague idea in my head in terms of like how the WFP, some portion of some sector of it could be like useful in opening up space. The kind of the statement that you made before, I'm like, that to me, I'm genuinely saying that to me sounds a little sounds confusing to me in terms of like the possibility of that. Like, I think a number of us in the room kind of have a pretty fierce critical analysis of like WFP and their relationship to the Democratic Party. So I'm just wondering, like, I am genuinely seeking some more kind of clarity as to what that picture might look like, or prediction, or how those possibilities might open up, and how it might in any way be informative to those of us that want that strategy to happen in a broader left sense. So.
Yeah, I had a question for Howie and then one for Brian. Howie, I write about the war on drugs, and I'm really happy to know that you have a really excellent position on marijuana, and that is for legalizing marijuana. Here in New York City, stop and frisk, 50,000 people a year. They're racially biased. Under de Blasio, the number of marijuana arrests have gone up, and they're projected to continue to go up, and they will continue to arrest people of color disproportionately. So I'm wondering if you could talk about that, because I think that is really, really important, the racism and the drug war that's happening right here in our city. The second question is for Brian or anybody else on the panel, but the Working Families Party, they say they're getting these concessions from Cuomo to front load abortion rights for women, public financing, a number of other promises. Do you think Cuomo is actually going to do any of this stuff that supposedly he's promised? And then the last thing is, I'm wondering, how are you going to handle when people say, look, I really want to vote for the Greens, but that Republican's going to get in. You're going to split that vote. I'm going to hold my nose and go for Cuomo. Basically the lesser evil. How are you going to handle that in campaign?
Great question. We just have one person on the list. We're just about down to 10 minutes where people got to give some feedback and questions. We'll go back to the panel before they forget what was said, and then some more from the audience. So Paul?
Okay, the Working Families Party never addresses the issue of pot. So, and we do constantly, and we're always at their meetings. We're a presence in that movement. And I also want to talk about the waste transfer station as part in 91st Street, big deal. you know, adding our Green New Deal takes on all kinds of environmental things, including waste transfers, so that nobody has to suffer but those kinds of environmental degradations.
Thank you. So let's go back to the panel for some responses and answering some of these questions, or responding to one another maybe for about 5 minutes before we go back into the audience participation. So we want to go opposite